Hey guys, Hamish here from Hobbies Direct, and today I'm going to be showing you how to install the Rovan Dominator-D power pipe to a 1/5 Baja 5B. Now, before we get stuck into the install, I thought I might just quickly share my thoughts about this particular pipe. The Dominator-D would have to be one of, if not the most popular aftermarket exhaust for the Baja series. It's affordable, it looks and sounds great, and most importantly, it delivers awesome all-round performance, improving power throughout the entire rev range. Also, being a one-piece designed exhaust, it has no joiners apart from the manifold gaskets, which means you don't need to worry about replacing seals and clamps like many other aftermarket exhaust systems. The only real downside I've encountered when running this pipe is that the outlet sits a bit exposed behind the rear right wheel and is prone to impacts during rollovers. So if you're planning on sending your buggy off jumps, I'd suggest maybe considering either the pigtail or Thor pipe, as their outlets sit much more protected. Alright, let's get on with the install. Start by removing the stock exhaust pipe. This buggy is fitted with a stock can, which is simply mounted by the two exhaust bolts. Use either an Allen key or, what I'm using, a socket wrench fitted with an extension bar. Now, before we can install the new exhaust, we want to make sure the engine's exhaust outlet is smooth and free of oil. You may need to carefully use a blade to scrape away any remains of the old exhaust gasket, and use some degreaser to wipe down the exhaust port just to help the new gasket seal properly. Be careful not to push any grass or dirt into the engine while cleaning the exhaust port. Now that the exhaust port is clean, we're ready to install the new pipe. We want to start by removing the rear bumper to make it easier to get the pipe into position. To do this, unscrew the two countersunk bolts under the rear chassis and then swing the bumpers out of the way. I also recommend removing the rear wing just to give ourselves a little extra room. Now we can start to wiggle the new exhaust pipe between the roll cage and rear shock tower, and once we've managed to get the pipe sitting roughly into position, we can then swing the rear bumpers back around to hold the pipe into place. Now take the two included manifold bolts and slide on one spring washer and one flat washer onto each. The spring washer will help prevent the bolts from vibrating loose. However, I do recommend using some high temp thread lock, such as Loctite 222, onto each of the exhaust manifold bolts, just to be sure that they don't loosen off during a run. Now take the new manifold heatsink and the new gaskets and make a bit of a gasket sandwich by placing a gasket either side of the heatsink, and then slide them all onto the manifold bolts. You can use gasket sealant if you want to, but I find if I've cleaned and prepped all contact areas properly, gasket sealant isn't necessary. Now that our manifold bolts and gaskets are into place, let's go ahead and start to tighten up the manifold bolts. Again, I'm using the extension on my socket wrench to help make things a little easier. Make sure the bolts are straight before you start to tighten them up, as you don't want to cross thread anything. Tighten up the manifold bolts evenly until they're almost completely tight. We still want to have a bit of movement in the exhaust to help us line up the rear bumper mount, which is coming up next. Take the included longer countersunk bolt and line up the rear exhaust mount with the top of the right bumper. Then start to do up the bolt until you can see a little bit of the thread poking through the bumper and the exhaust mount. Now you can go ahead and place the included nut on top of the thread and hold it there with a ring spanner. Then continue to tighten up the bolt. Once you've completely tightened the rear bumper exhaust mount, reinstall the left bumper and then return to the two manifold bolts and tighten them all the way up evenly. Reinstall the wing and body and you're ready for a test run. I do recommend checking the exhaust manifold after your first couple of runs to make sure it isn't leaking and that the bolts are still tight. Well, thanks for watching. I hope you found this video useful, and if you'd like to stay up to date with our upcoming RC videos, be sure to subscribe.